Yo, yo, yo. It is Tuesday, September 21st. Welcome to another episode of Tuesdays with Jakey. I have for a while now been wanting to do a hammock cast, and necessity is the mother of hammock inventions, as they say. And my little house is getting worked on up here. They're putting new flooring in. Um, I was supposed to be away this week, and I'm not, so that's why it was scheduled to be put in while I was away, but I'm here. So I spent last night and yesterday prepping all the stuff to be moved out of my house for what was supposed to be a 1 day flooring job, which nothing, construction, right? Never going to be what they say. So I came home, um, thinking I'd do my podcast this evening to find out that they're going to be working way late and all the way all day tomorrow. So I set up my little rig here and I got my hammock cast going in my hammock in the driveway. I kick my shoes off. What do I need shoes for in a hammock? Um, and yeah, my most of my house is out. Most of my belongings are outside my house, which I guess makes perfect sense because I'm moving out anyway. I'll be moving out the end of October to move up to Yellow Pine, leaving McCalm for now, um, which is feels weird. Doesn't even feel real. But I did tell my friends that I've been renting this place from that I would be leaving um, last week, and they were very gracious and said that they were going to miss me, and that I'll always have a home here on their property in McCalm, and the nest will always be available to me. They call my house the Owl's Nest. Um, but obviously, Shanti, the mama bear of the group, is a very matronly figure. Matronly might be a weird word, but very like nurturing presence and woman. And they did kind of build me a nest up here, and it's interesting to think back about. It was just about a year ago, a little more than a year ago, that I asked them if I could stay here for the winter. And in case you're new to this podcast or need a little refresher, I left New York City on June 15th after having and suffering badly from COVID and recovering, and then being involved in lots of anti-police protests, uh, Black Lives Matter protests. For me, they were anti-police protests because, fuck the police, man. Like, fuck the institution of the police. That's how I feel. Yes, there's good cops. Plenty of good cops. There's plenty of good teachers, too, but, like, fuck institutional education as well. Like, man, shit needs to get burned down. So, or, incrementalism isn't going to fix things, right? Like, we need big changes, which we're seeing in, in the climate crisis right now. I don't need to dig into all that. But anyway, fuck incrementalism. And fuck the police. Man, what a great NWA song and album Straight Outta Compton was. But yeah, so I took off on my motorcycle, and like at all, it's such a neatly wrapped bow at this point to look back on. So it does bear reflection from me and internally and verbally, I guess, in this podcast, that it just seems like it all happened the way it was supposed to, and that it was easy. And I talked a couple of weeks ago about being terrified when I take off on these adventures. And I'll get a little later. There's good reason to be terrified when you're on a motorcycle, riding dirt roads all the time, because sometimes the rubber side doesn't stay down, if you know what I mean. I'll get to that later. Um, but yeah, it seems sometimes when I look back at these things, like it just happens, because it kind of does, because you just gotta go for it, and I just go for it almost all the time. I just say, screw it, let's do it, right? Or just do it, or just fucking go for it. Or I guess those are all other people's phrases, right? Screw it, let's do it is Richard Branson's phrase. Just do it is Nike. I guess if I have a phrase of my own, it's what's the worst that could happen, right? I have that tattoo, or at least the acronym for that. WTWTCH, right? What's the worst that could happen? I have that tattooed somewhere on me. I forget where. Like with most of my tattoos, I lose track of where they are on my body. Uh, so many of those little postage stamp tattoos. But yeah, I just say fuck it. And like last June 15th, I said fuck it. And really, it was like probably like June 7th or 8th. I think it was the 8th when I said to my landlord, like, I'm going to be out of here on the 15th. And he was like, what? I was like, yeah, I'm out, man. I don't have a lease. He got very mad at me. And then, of course, he was very happy when he found out he could rent the apartment for a lot more than what he was getting from me. And we ended up talking a bunch after I left, and had a number of nice conversations. He thought it was weird that I was living in the woods in the middle of Idaho, because most of the time I talked to him, I was camping. And then he ended up dying not long ago because he had cancer when I left. And I knew he was trying to sell the building. It was no big... I was going to have to find a new apartment anyway, so it kind of made it easy because I knew he was going to be selling the building. It made it easy in that regard, but like that's a building I called home since 2012, so it never made it easy, especially being in the neighborhood it was in on Elizabeth Street in Soho, Little Italy, and just like, I knew I wasn't going to be able to find an apartment that was that good of a deal because if I haven't mentioned this before, my landlord was a criminal. Operating a criminal enterprise out of the building, and part of the reason I got into the building was a friend had lived there before and wanted out because he had a bad breakup there. And when I got into that building, when I met Frankie, he was like, Omar, I told you how it works around here. You pay first of the month, fucking cash. No fucking checks. I don't take checks. You pay fucking cash. You're never late. I don't want no fucking excuses. And you keep your eyes closed, your mouth shut. You don't see nothing. You don't say nothing about what you might even see around here. You got that? I was like, oh man, this sounds like a perfect situation for me. And I saw tons of criminal activity and heard about tons of criminal activity, none of which I will ever speak about on this podcast, but if you have me over for dinner, I'll tell you tons of stories of the shenanigans that I heard about and saw going on in that building. Maybe even was part of here and there. No, of course not. Of course not. I was never part of any of it. I really wasn't. I was privy to, accessory to, maybe. Accessory, probably. I probably could have been tried as an accessory to some of those crimes, tried and convicted, but here I am anyway in Idaho. But it was hard to leave New York City in the midst of all that and not know where the fuck I was going. And especially like having come out of treatment, like in some ways it made it so much easier because I was like, I can do whatever I want with my life now. But like not knowing where you're going to live in the middle of a fucking pandemic is hard. And I was like, I'm just going to ride around on my motorcycle and camp until I figure it out. And got my motorcycle, camped for a while, came to visit this house in McCalm, Idaho, where my friends Greg and Shanti live and have lived since 2007. And they had told me for years, like, come visit, come visit. I found out later, not long ago, that like only 5 people have ever come to visit them since they moved here in 2007, because it's the middle of fucking nowhere. And that's what everyone would tell them. And when they would ask me a bunch of times, they would say, come visit us. Then I'm like, wait, you live where? I got to fly to Boise, which from New York City, at that point, there were no direct flights. JetBlue just started one, but it's an overnight flight. But there were no direct flights. So I was like, I got to take connecting flights to Boise and then rent a car and then drive 2.5 hours up into the fucking mountains of Idaho, which who knew Idaho had mountains at that point? I just thought it was all potato fields, just like I'm sure all of you listening have thought. Maybe very likely until you started listening to this podcast and heard me talk about the mountains here. But I was like, why the fuck would I ever go there? But then the pandemic came. And, because it's like, you pop in and see people for a few days, right? What is there to do in Idaho? Who knew? I didn't know. Like, they didn't sell it either. I got to say, they were not good at selling it. They could have done a better job explaining it to me and sending pictures if they wanted me to come visit, or any of their other friends. But everyone in Idaho is stoked that no one knows how fucking cool it is. And they're kind of the official state motto might as well be, don't tell anyone else how fucking cool it is here. Because it's basically got all the things people love about Colorado without any of the liberals that make Colorado insufferable. Yeah, it's pretty true. I mean, liberals are very insufferable. Like, conservatives are fucking aggravating and depressing, and many liberals are insufferable. Most liberals, because they're not even really liberal for the most part. That's why I like being a communist or a progressive, however you want to call it, or just like apolitical, I guess, mostly is what I should be. But yeah, so I came out here and ended up coming by on my motorcycle, and they never told me they had a separate building, like a separate house for me to stay in. So when I first came here the first time, I just assumed that I would be like staying in a spare bedroom with them. And it was like, well, how long could that last? So I never even imagined in my wildest dreams that I would live here. And I thought I was going to like stay here for a little while, hang out with them, keep motorcycling, keep camping. Eventually I was going to hang out with my friend Annabelle in Boulder, who I knew she had a guest house. So I was like, all right, that's a place I can post up in for a while. And then I figured by the time it got cold, I'd move down to Austin and see my friends Rick and Marianne, who have extra bedrooms. But I was like, I figured I'd just go down and see them, see my friends in New Orleans, head up through Tennessee, see some friends in Nashville. And I thought eventually, like by the time fall came, that I would end up probably in Asheville, North Carolina for a multitude of reasons. I thought that would be a good place to end up, that wouldn't get super cold. I know, I'm stupid. Asheville gets tons of snow. But I also was thinking like northern Georgia, somewhere in that area, maybe a place where I could like ride my motorcycle at least most of the year and wouldn't end up needing to buy a car. And still be within like quote unquote striking distance of New York City for when shows came back in the fall, which all of that got blown out of the fucking water. And like almost on a daily basis, we could see how things were progressing, that COVID was not going to go away. So yeah, I came out here and I stayed for a few days, a week, whatever it was. And then I took off on my bike for like 10 days, went to Butte, Montana, went to Glacier National Park, went to the Grave of Evel Knievel, Missoula, then ended up in Yellowstone, where I ran into Johnny Corndog and spent a few days with him and his wife and kid. And then I circled back here and stayed for like another week and a half or 2 weeks. And then I took off for what ended up being 6 weeks. I didn't know how long I was going to be gone for. I thought I was just going to go out to the Oregon coast and up into Washington. I thought I'd be gone like 2 or 3 weeks. I ended up being gone for 6 weeks and camping, and ended up on Murder Mountain and these remote black sand beaches on California's Lost Coast, and just like with no fucking idea what was happening or what was going to happen to me. And I was doing therapy 5 days a week at that point. So I was doing 3 days a week with my therapist, and I was doing 2 days a week with this group therapy thing that the program I had been in offered to let me into for free for a trial for 6 weeks. Then they thought they were going to suck me into pay. I was like, joke's on you, suckers. I don't have any money. But yeah, I did that for 6 weeks. It was like on these video Zoom group therapies, which was kind of cool. Towards the end, I was kind of over it. But yeah, I was lost. I didn't know what to do. And I guess it probably seemed easy, right? If you were paying attention to what I was up to at that point, because I was just posting these awesome pictures of places my motorcycle was taking me, but it was scary. Trying to figure out a new way to live and be. Like, I had to reboot my whole mental structure when I was in treatment and came out of it, and then I was ready to do a whole cruise season, and that got snatched away, and COVID, and God, Jesus, like, just like camping in the fucking woods day after day after day. Like, I wasn't on a camping trip. That's the thing I got to remember, is like, I wasn't just out for like, oh, I'm going to go on a camping trip and then go home. You know, it was like, I'm basically fucking homeless. I'm just like, Jack Kerouacing that shit without hitchhiking. And it was a trip, man. It was a literal and metaphorical fucking trip. And I wasn't breathing well. And then when I finally came back here after 6 weeks for Labor Day weekend, I said to Greg and Shanti, like, they were like, where are you going? And I was like, I don't know. I thought I was just going to keep riding, but there's all these forest fires. And I was like, can I just stay here? They were like, of course you can. And they kind of laughed, and they were like, we were wondering when you were going to ask. Like, you seem so comfortable up here. They were like, some of our friends who've come to visit, a couple of the groups of friends who came to visit disappeared after 2 days. They were like, we can't take it. And they're like, but you're here, and you're just like calm. Like, you're settling into life here. And I was like, yeah, I dig it. And obviously that's become a theme now. I really like peace and quiet. And I had this thing that happened to me last year. It was on that first trip I took that turned into a 10-day trip. I was trying to ride this thing called the Magruder Corridor, which I rode a couple of weeks ago, that I rode on my birthday. And I tried to do it last year, and I showed up there, and it was July the 1st. And it was closed because there was still snow and down trees and everything on it. So I wasn't able to go over that. So I went and nosed my way around, and I found some dirt roads that I kind of figured would get me towards where I wanted to go. And I didn't have a good dirt road map at that point, but I was like, I kind of knew if I have a very good sense of direction somehow, not a compass, but I kind of knew like, well, eventually, like if I'm on this road, I make a right, like you can't get that lost. Or so, so I thought. I was like, eventually it's going to end up at that next paved road. That's going to save me from having to ride all the way 50 miles back into Grangeville. So it was like a long shortcut. But I was like, I came out here to ride a crazy dirt road, so I'm going to find crazy dirt roads. And I was up in these dirt roads, and at a certain point, I was like, I'm out of my element. You're out of your element, Donnie. I was out of my element. I don't know where the fuck I am. My phone doesn't work out here. I didn't download the map to my phone. But I was like, well, I have food. I have water, right? I have my tent. Like, what's the worst that could happen? I kept thinking. And I was like, eventually, every road's eventually going to come out to a dirt road, to a paved road. Or it's just going to come to an end. But not really, because there's all these Forest Service mountain roads. They all end up somewhere. And if it just ends, then you turn around, right? You just, you pray for the best. You pray you don't run out of gas. But I have a big gas tank. I get like 200 miles on a full tank. And that's a long way when you're in the forest. Not when you're in the Frank Church, Bitterroot, River of No Return wilderness. But that's not where I was. And I had this very, very specific moment that I still remember. And at one point, I was up on top of this ridge and couldn't really see much. Couldn't like make out any sort of civilization off in the distance. But I was like, well, eventually I'm going to come out. I'm going to be fine. But I was on these logging roads. So I was like, I could see big ruts from the truck tires. And you could see logs stacked all over the place. These trees had been felled and stacked. So they were waiting to come be put in the back of trucks and then driven out to a lumber processing mill or whatever the fuck they do. How they make paper or boards. And so I was like, no matter what happens, eventually someone's going to come along. So like I wasn't too worried, but I was worried about falling over and not being able to get my bike up because there were so many ruts. But I was like, well, if that happens, I'll just fucking pitch a tent and wait for a logging truck to come along, and like then they can direct me how to get out of here. Like in the end, I'm not going to be fucked, And I had some cans of beans. So I wasn't really stressed about that, and I was just out, and I was like reflecting about how amazing it was to be out and just like that I had just taken off, and I had no idea that I would end up living in Idaho at that point. I was just like lost out in the middle of nowhere in Idaho, just lost in the best sense of the word. And just like, it's times like that where you start to realize how insignificant you are, which I think is an important thing about being alive and understanding that like everything you do is important, kind of, but nothing you do is really important. You don't want to use that as an excuse to hurt people or hurt people's feelings, but like, the universe, the earth, the town, like everything's going to keep going no matter what happens. You make a bad decision, you crash your bike, you change jobs, none of it really matters. You want to be happy in the moment, right? You want to keep people around you that make you happy. You want to love people and be loved back, obviously, of course. But like, it's very important, I think, to realize the lack of significance that your everyday actions have. And it lets you be free to, chase dreams and follow your spirit guide, however that may be. And my spirit guide told me years ago that I needed to live in New York City, and I did for a long time, and it made me happy for a long time. And I started a very successful business that I ran for a long time. And then eventually, at a certain point, I was looking for more, and I started running away. And I ran to Africa, and I ran to Asia, and I ran to South America. And then I ended up running to Las Vegas to kill myself. I was so unhappy. I ran to London, took a job there. And I was just running away from things. And eventually, I needed to figure out how to live. And here I was, up on the top of a mountain, just like, wow. How the fuck did I end up here? This is fucking great. Just being in the moment. Being like, it doesn't matter where I end up. That's what I'm talking about when it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I put on more rock concerts, right? What matters is me being happy to wake up every day and excited to be in the world. Right? I wasn't excited to pick up the phone and try to book more concerts. I'm certainly not now. If I was, I would have done more of them. But I also I want to do some cool, fun ones. I still want to do them next year, but I also knew this past spring that it wasn't going to be an easy road to hoe, and a lot of them were probably going to end up getting canceled. We just canceled another one for the Brooklyn Bowl. You know, I've the things I have tried to put forward this year, concert-wise, have almost all fallen apart. And thankfully, I've had some other promoters putting some shows on, and you deal with the headaches. Just use my boat. Let me get a little bit of money. And I was up there on that ridge, though, never knowing I was going to book another show. Never knowing really full well if I was going to get out of there. Maybe I could get eaten by a grizzly bear. Now I realize that that's very, very slim chance of happening. But at that point, I didn't know anything. I didn't know if I was going to move back to New York City. I certainly wasn't sure that I wasn't moving back to New York City like I am now. Or at least I'm as sure as I can be. I'm pretty fucking positive that is not in my short-term plan. But I was just up there on that ridge, looking out and just kind of marveling at how deep in the middle of nowhere I had gotten myself without any idea really of where I was going. I just kind of well, eventually I'll make it to Highway 12, and eventually I'll take that to Missoula and the Glacier and the Butte, and hopefully I'll get there by Evel Knievel. I wanted to get to Evel Knievel's grave by the 4th of July. I think on the 2nd or 3rd of July, I was supposed to be... I knew I needed to get to somewhere with internet so I could do a video podcast with the band The New Deal, which I did, and it's on their YouTube page. So if you look at their YouTube page from this past July, it was a very entertaining appearance I did where we talked mostly about the wetlands years and a lot about my riding. I might rip the audio from that and put that out as a future podcast. But yeah, it was really entertaining because I drank 4 cups of coffee, found a motel in Missoula, drank 4 cups of coffee, and I was amped from a big day of riding. And I just they just asked a couple questions, and I just fucking yelled for an hour. But I was up there on that ridge trying to just contemplating my entire existence, basically. And I just kept riding, and I kept thinking about the city, and I kept thinking about the thoughts I'd been having since I left the city. And at a certain point, I remember I was coming down the backside of this mountain, and at a certain point, I saw way off in the distance, I saw this covered wooden bridge that looked like something off of a postcard. It was definitely a few miles away, but I could make it out. And I was like, all right, this road's gonna end up down at that bridge. And if that bridge was built, they don't build bridges like that so deep in the middle of nowhere. So I was pretty much relieved. I was like, okay, I'm gonna get out of here now. I'd been, probably 4 hours just riding these dirt roads that I didn't know where they were going. Never scared though, never worried that I wouldn't get out. I just knew eventually I would find my way out, or I would stop and wait. And someone would come along. Probably a logger. Maybe turn me into pulp. Could have ended up in a piece of your IKEA furniture. Which is not true, because IKEA maintains their own forests in Sweden that they manage and cut down to make their own wood pulp, by the way, in case you didn't know. That's IKEA is a sustainable company for that reason. Who knew, right? But I saw this covered bridge, and I was like, I'm going to make my way down to it. And at a certain point, it just fucking hit me. I don't know what made me think of it, but it hit me almost like a bolt of lightning. And I thought to myself, there's different types of people who move to New York City. 2 different types of people, really, that gravitate towards that. And one type gravitates towards that because they need to feed off that energy. You go to the city because that's where you're going to find a good job, and you're going to be able to engage in art and culture. And you need to go to the place where everybody is. And for some reason, I thought there's the other type of person is the person that is a turbine, that creates energy, that creates culture, that's going to move these things by themselves, that's going to get involved and make changes and provide the energy that the other people need you can be a consumer of energy or a source of energy is kind of what I was thinking. And I realized in that moment, for some reason, I realized that I'm a source of energy. And when I was down in treatment and it was quiet, like my brain doesn't quiet down and it doesn't stop thinking of ideas and it doesn't stop being creative. And that flipped a fucking switch. It made my brain do a 180 about where I needed to be. Because I had thought for my whole life that I needed to be in New York or London or Paris or Tokyo to like be able to make a difference. And I needed to be in these places where things happen. Then I realized, like, in that moment, I realized, like, I make things happen wherever I am. And there was no reason for me to believe that to be true. I just knew it was true and I felt it. And that was it. I thought about it and it went through my brain and I thought about it for a while and I thought about it the next day. And it didn't show me anything at that time other than you're not going to go back to New York. And I was fine with that. And I was like, all I want to do is write now. So, like, I'm going to ride around my motorcycle. I'm going to take notes, write in my journal, and eventually find a place to settle down and write this book. And it put me at ease a lot because it freed me from feeling like I had to be in a place to be a whole person, I guess you'd say. And yeah, it just left me feeling way more free. I'm like, I can just do whatever the fuck I want. It's not even about what I do or who I'm around. Like, I'm my own source of energy. And that it's interesting now to look back and see how that's played out. You know, like that was July, but then I spent most of the July and August riding, and then it was just about a year ago, as I say, that I came back here and decided to rent this place, and then I ended up getting sick again with pneumonia, which was a long haul COVID thing. As far as they could tell, was because of my weakened lung capacity from COVID the first time, the only time. Then I had another chest infection this fast spring, and hopefully I'm not going to have another one this fall. It's been less smoky here. Haven't smoked anything. I haven't smoked anything at all since my last chest infection. I haven't even smoked a little bit of reefer. Keep thinking about it, but every time I think about it, like I was the other night, I just realized, like, I just don't want to be high. Yeah, I don't want to change my consciousness. I want to change my consciousness, but I don't really want to. So every time I'm thinking about getting high, I'm like, do I want, like, how am I going to feel an hour from now? I'm going to wish I wasn't high, probably. So I just say, fuck it. And that was something I had when I would stop drinking, especially the first time I stopped drinking. People would ask me, like, why don't you drink anymore? And I was like, because I put on my future goggles. It was a term I came up with. So like, if I put on my future goggles, I can see to the future. And I can see that if I have a drink now, 3 hours from now, I'm going to be drunk. And then I'm going to be hungover tomorrow. And I don't want that. I certainly don't want that now. I don't want the feeling of being hungover. And that's the thing that prevents me from drinking even one drink. Because I know one will lead to 2 or 3, maybe more, but maybe not. But even 1 or 2 or 3 will end up making me feel lousy the next day. And I don't want to feel lousy the next day, and I don't want to feel the drunk today either. That's the whole point. But that whole thing was freeing. And then when I came back here and decided to stay, and then I started writing, and I worked on the crazy big outline for the book, and I started being like, well, right, I can do this here. And then I took up painting, and I've gotten to be pretty good at painting. It's also subjective, but I'm pretty good at making paintings that satisfy me and make me feel like I did what I set out to do when I sat down to paint, which is the whole point, really, right? Yeah, obviously, if people like them, cool. If not, who cares? Like, I like them. My fucking house is full of paintings I made that I haven't even tried to sell because I don't want to get rid of them. I was talking to someone about selling paintings. I have sold a few that people have inquired about when I put them on Instagram. Most of them I haven't even put on Instagram. So we were talking about how to price a painting, and I told them at one point, I was like, mine are all expensive, and they're on I posted some of them on my rocksoft.bigcartel.com plug here. But my friend was like, those are expensive. And I was like, well, that's what it costs for me to take them off my wall and never see them again. Like, I don't really care how much it costs for you to buy it. That's what that's how much money it takes for me to lose it. Um, I think that's a very healthy way to look at it. Like, because my friend was inferring that like no one's going to pay that for it, and I was like, well, good. Then I'll keep it. I'm not. It's not. I'm not making fucking commerce here. Though sure, I turn it into commerce. Of course, I got to make a living, but like I have other ways to make a living, and it feels really good to do something like that. That's just for me. And it's yet another reminder, like that I was right when I saw that covered bridge and realized that, like, yeah, I I can I can create things and be creative and feel satisfied no matter where I am, and I don't need to be in New York to experience that. And to be honest, I like didn't take advantage of tons of what New York had to offer anyway, other than the one of the main things that New York offered me for all those years was customers for my concerts. And I wish I had realized that sooner and gotten out of there. But it's like, I didn't go to museums. I didn't go to all the bars. I went to see a lot of music shows and stand-up comedy shows and magic shows, sure. But like, I talk to my buddy Imran all the time, and he's like, oh, remember so-and-so, such and such boutique? And he's talking about all these boutiques and hip clothing stores and sneaker shops and all these places that I'm like, I have no fucking idea what you're talking about. And then he would tell me where they were, and I'd be like, I would walk by those places every day. Like, I don't know what I was doing in New York for all that time. I don't regret it, but it was like if I wasn't taking advantage of all those things, and like I wasn't going to new restaurants all the time. Sure, every now and then it'd be like I want to try a new Thai restaurant, but I was like, I'd go back there and be like, I need to eat at this Italian place, this Thai place, this sushi place, this Mexican place, this Chinese place, like so many different places that I know one good one of, and I scouted out, and then I found it. And it's like, I'm not one of those guys who was at new restaurant openings all the time and art gallery openings. Like, I never did any of that shit. So what the fuck was I doing there? I know what I was doing. I was finding customers for my service. And now I have a different service. Turns out my service is tending bar and making cheeseburgers, which has worked for me for this summer and satisfied an itch. It satisfied an itch of performance. It satisfied an itch of community, finding a community up there. It certainly satisfied an itch of acceptance, of being accepted into a community in a way that I don't think I had been previously. I tried really hard to get accepted into communities my whole life, to get accepted into communities in grade school and middle school and high school, and trying different communities. And then I got to New York and trying to get accepted into the punk scene and the hardcore scene and the metal scene, and never tried for the indie rock scene, but the garage rock scene and the fucking jam band scene. And like, I can float through a lot of those different scenes, but I tried really hard to get accepted in those. And I went to shows and pretended to like certain bands that I didn't really like, just to, forge some sort of bond and friendship with people. Whereas when I got to Yellow Pine, nobody knew who I was. When I got to McCalm, no one knew who I was. And I never really tried to integrate into McCalm because COVID was here and it was weird. And it was like I tried a few times here and there. Tried meeting some different people. And like, it was okay. But like, definitely didn't find the groove here. Then I just showed up in Yellow Pine. Went up there on a whim one day just to go for a ride. Then went back 2 weeks later, with the intention of like figuring out how to get a job at the Yellow Pine Tavern. And I went up there for 3 days, and I left my phone at home, and I was just camping and reading that Ralph Waldo Emerson book on Walden. And it was just everything was agreeing with me. And I was like, I like the vibe here. I like the energy. I went into the tavern 3 days in a row just to fill my water bottles and get some food, so I didn't have to like make campfire stove beans every day. And then I just got a job, and then I fell into it, and I fell into a nice rhythm, and people started liking me, and I didn't tell them anything about me. I didn't tell them my last name. I wouldn't tell them what I really did for work. I just kind of glossed over. I just worked in production coordination, making sure equipment showed up where it was supposed to for the concert business. And I think I really found out that, like, yeah, you either fucking take the energy from a place or you bring the energy to a place. And I fucking brought the energy to Yellow Pine. And people have told me over and over, like, what an asset I am, and what an asset I am to the town, and an asset I am to the tavern itself, and how I make people want to come hang out there because they know on the nights I'm working there's going to be good music and good conversation. And even when I blow up and start screaming at people and throw them out of the fucking tavern when they test my patience, like, they still love me, and everyone apologizes for the other people, and I don't have to apologize for myself because I was right. You know, and I would just get to be me, and I got accepted for being me. And looking back at remembering now that day, looking at that covered bridge and being like, you know, what am I? Where do I need to be? Who am I? What do I want to be? Who do I want to be? I just want to be me. And I think I'm more me now than I have been in a long time. Because I didn't go to Yellow Pine to try to impress people. I just went to be me. I'm like, they like me. And I make good tips. And I just act however the fuck I want. And I've talked about that, about like maybe I would bartend in McCall. It's like I would get fired on day one. And, you know, Lorraine would probably be the first one to tell you that. I mean, she loves me to death and I love her to death. And we've totally bonded. And she says I'm her angel and God must have sent me to her. And she says she literally didn't know what she'd do if I hadn't shown up. And other people have told me that they thought she might have worked herself to death. The tavern might not be open. She might have just fucking slammed the door closed one day. But when the chips were down and I had to figure something out, I figured something out. And that taught me a lot about myself. And I figured it out by accident. And then it wasn't some grand plan. I didn't think, when I was like, I'm going to go up there and get a job there, I wasn't like, yeah, I'll make a bunch of money and then I'll make t-shirts for the tavern and then I'll make these suck and blow shirts for Harmonica Fest and, you know, make a bunch of money. I was just like, this just seems cool, man. Like, I thought it was cool and different and it would be weird and wild and fun and interesting. And that's kind of how I've made every decision in my life. It was just chasing the cool and the fun and the wild and the weird. And eventually it works out for me. But it's a lot of chasing and it's a lot of jumping off the cliff with both feet into the unknown, whether it's leaving New York. Even going to Yellow Pine for the first time, everyone told me, why would you go there? Everyone I met on my call was like, why would you go to Yellow Pine? There's nothing there. No one. And then I would say, when's the last time you've been there? And they'd all say, we've never been. And I'm like, that right there is, in a nutshell, what's wrong with the world. Like, everybody makes judgments about what they think will be cool and will be not cool and just doesn't go do it. Go figure it out for yourself, man. Like, why are you going to tell people Yellow Pine's not cool? Why are you going to tell people that broccoli doesn't taste good or that sushi tastes slimy? No, it doesn't. It's fucking great. You know, but people have all these preconceived notions of everything, and then the anxiety gets into your head about why you shouldn't try something, why you shouldn't do something new. And it's like, always do something new. He who is not busy being born is busy dying, right? I think that's a Bob Dylan lyric. But it's so true. Like, try some new shit. You know, turn that rock over. See what the fuck is underneath. Yeah, there might be a rattlesnake underneath, and it might strike at you. But, like, turn it over carefully. Chances are it's not going to be a rattlesnake. It's going to be something cool. Might even be a lever to a secret room. And it will be in a lot of ways. You know, it's not really a rock I'm asking you to turn over. Like, I'm speaking in metaphors. You know, go visit a new place. See what the fuck is out there. You know, open yourself up. Try something new. I'm not saying you specifically, unless you really think that you need to open yourself up and try something new, in which case I'm talking directly to you. But, like, you know if you're a fucking hump or not, right? Like, a lot of people, I think, look in the mirror every day and go, I wish I could do something different. Then just fucking do it. Life's short. COVID teaches you that, right? I might have been exposed to COVID the other day. Might have been. I'm sure I was exposed to COVID all the fucking time up in Yellow Pine, but someone up there in Yellow Pine just tested positive. First person who's tested positive in Yellow Pine. Might be the first person who's gotten tested. It's an old woman named Margaret, 84 years old. COPD, CPOD, whatever it's called. She's got that breathing issue. She smokes like a fucking chimney. Chain smokes all the time. She's hooked up to an oxygen machine. She's only been into the tavern once since I've been there. She's mean. She's rude. She's callous. And now she had to get life flighted out the other day, and it turns out she had COVID, and Lorraine called to tell me. And, it could be curtains for me next week. Probably not, because I'm vaccinated, right? I hope everyone else out there is vaccinated. I bet Margaret wasn't vaccinated, so, it could be curtains for her. But it's just making me think, I wonder if Margaret did anything new in her life. Or how many things, even at 84 years old, how many things that she never got to experience that she wanted to. I'm like, isn't that what it's showing us now? COVID? That, get out there, do something different. Get out of your comfort zone. Just think to yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Maybe you crash a motorcycle, which I did the other day. I was supposed to go work at Punk Rock Bowling this weekend, and I chose not to for a variety of reasons, which I didn't know how I was going to explain this. And guess what? I'm not. But for a variety of reasons, I chose not to go work at this festival, which I thought for a while I wanted to, and then for a bunch of reasons, it became very clear that I didn't want to, and it was very hard for me to let down my friend and make that call last week and say, hey, I don't want to do this. I'm not doing it. But one thing I've learned is that you got to stand up for yourself, because nobody else is going to stand up for you. And I decided it was going to be unhealthy for me to go do that for a number of reasons, none of which have to do with me being afraid to go back to Las Vegas, in case you're wondering. I just didn't, it didn't, a lot of stuff about it didn't sit right with me, COVID protocols and other things. And I just said, fuck it, I'm not going to do it. So I didn't do it. But everybody in Yellow Pine, a big storm was coming in on Saturday. And to get out of Yellow Pine, no matter how you want to try to get out of that town, if you want to call it that village, no matter how you're going to try to get out of there, you got to go over a 7,000-foot pass. The village of Yellow Pine exists at 4,700 feet. Where I live in McCall is almost 6,000 feet. The town of McCall is 5,200 feet. But you got to go over 7,000 feet. Any of the three ways you can try to get out of there. And a big storm was coming in, and everyone knew that I was supposed to be going to Las Vegas. And then I was going to have to leave Sunday. I told a few people, everyone. There's not that many people to tell. But people started coming in the tavern. Jake, aren't you supposed to go out tomorrow? And that's an interesting phrase. Yellow Pine is so secluded and insular that the way people refer to coming to the town or leaving the town are coming in and going out. Oh, when did you come in? I came in yesterday. When are you going out? So it's like it exists as its own thing that you come into and go out of, which I thought was interesting. Not like, oh, when did you get to town? When are you leaving town? It's very specific. Come in and go out. So people kept saying, hey, don't you have to go out tomorrow? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, you should really go out today. Like, the weather forecast just for Yellow Pine itself was a low of 42 and rain all Saturday night and then all day and night Sunday. And I was like, well, it's just going to rain. What's the big deal? And then everyone was like, well, yeah, but up on the passes, it's going to snow. And you don't want to be trying to go over Lick Creek Summit in the snow or Big Creek Summit in the snow. And I was like, oh, yeah, good point. So finally I said to Lorin at like 4 o'clock on Saturday, hey, I think I'm going to head out of here because like everyone's got me nervous about the snow. And she was like, yeah, actually, that's a really good point. You don't want to wait till tomorrow. If you wait till tomorrow, you're going to be stuck here till Monday or Tuesday. And I was like, yeah, definitely can't have that happen. So I left. It was pretty funny because everyone was giving me advice and making sure I was dressed warm enough. And I packed my bags up and strapped into the bike. And it felt like that scene in Borat where he's leaving his village in Kazakhstan to go to America. Everybody was there to see me off. So many similarities, especially the way a lot of the folks in Yellow Pine look to those in Borat's village. And everybody, so they were seeing me off. And Lauren gave me some trash bags. I had a pretty, like a rainproof North Face jacket, like 4 layers under that, and I had Gore-Tex gloves. But all I had was my little riding jeans with the little padding in them, in the knees and the hip, and I asked Lauren for some trash bags to put over my legs for when the rain started, and she threw me some, and I stuffed them in my pocket. And I was like, I'm going to ride. I'm going to just get as far as I can get, I'm going to try to go up over Lick Creek Summit because it was 69 degrees when I was leaving at almost exactly 5 o'clock. I left at 4:58 p.m. on Saturday. And it was 69 degrees. And I was like, well, that's pretty damn good. Like, I'm in really good shape. I don't have that long to go to get over the summit. An hour and a half. Really about an hour to Lick Creek Summit. But I was like, the more ground I can cover before it starts raining, the better off I'll be. And the road is fairly well graded, the dirt road, the first 15 miles of it that go to the pavement turnoff of the South Fork Road, which I was not going to take because that was just even on a bike trying to go fast, that's 2 hours and 45 minutes home. Whereas like I could make it 90 minutes on a regular day going over Lick Creek and as low as 71 minutes or even 69 minutes. I'm really pushing. And so I was like, I'm just going to go as fast as I can. And I don't know, shit got in my head. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was stressed about not going to Las Vegas for punk rock bowling. That was clouding my head. And I was ripping along at 50 miles an hour or something on these dirt roads, which is not even that fast for some stretches. But I was headed into this bend, and I've looked down at my little LCD display. Looks like a digital watch on my motorcycle, and I pushed the button a couple times with my thumb to see what the temperature was. It was probably about 10 miles into the ride, and I just fucking wasn't paying attention. I took my eye off the road, and when I looked up, the turn was a lot closer than I thought it was going to be, and I tried to turn to the left, and I didn't make the turn, and I did that thing like I should have swung my head to the left, but instead I focused on where my bike was headed instead of focusing on where you wanted it to go. And it's one of the number one rules of motorcycling is look where you want the bike to go, not where it's going. And if you watch a lot of motorcycle crashes, you'll see people headed towards a tree or whatever. You look these things up on like Instagram and TikTok, and it's like the person's just looking right at it, staring at it, and it's like, yeah, you got to turn your head. Target fixation, object fixation, whatever you want to call it. And I didn't turn my head, but I looked. I was going off the road to the right to a ditch. The river was on the left, thank goodness. So I wasn't in danger of going into the river, but there's like a little 8-inch ditch. And there were two pretty big boulders that had rolled down into that ditch. And I just was like, I got to navigate between these two boulders. It all happened in a split second. And I was like, if I just get between these two boulders, I might be able to like then ride in the ditch for a little and then pop back out. And I knew if I hit one of those two boulders, it was going to be curtains because I was going to go up over the bike and probably pop one of my tires. That was what was in my head. And I managed to get between the boulders, did not manage to get back up on the road. I don't know how much I had slowed down to, but the bike slid out and I fell down onto my left and scraped along, I guess. I don't even know. But I know I went down and I went down hard. And when I realized that I wasn't moving anymore, I looked up and saw a pickup truck coming in the other direction. And I was like, well, that's handy because there's almost never anyone out here on these roads. And I got out from under the bike before the pickup truck got to me, and two guys got down out of the truck, and I had taken my helmet off by that point, and they were like, they both jumped out of the truck pretty quickly. They were like, dude, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. And I'd like shaken my legs and my arms out, and like I was pretty confident nothing was broken. You could pretty much tell that. Once you stand up and try to move your arms and legs, you're going to know if something's broken. And I was like, well, I'm in pretty good shape. So I said to the guys, I was like, yeah, I'm fine, like, and they were like, are you sure you're fine? You hit pretty fucking hard. And I was like, yeah, well, I know I did. But yeah, I feel like, I think I'm okay. Like, can you help me get the bike up? And they helped me lift the bike up, and then they helped me get it out of the ditch. I got on it and started it, and it started right up, and I put it down in a first gear, and like, they kind of like each guided the side of it just in case I had trouble getting out, but I was able to get it out of the ditch pretty good. And got it back up on the road, put the kickstand down, got off again, surveyed the bike. They were like, oh my God, like none of your levers, pedals, none of it's broken. And I was like, well, oddly enough, these bikes are made to crash, And there's these big engine guards on the bike, these metal things that go around each side of the engine casing on the left and on the right, which actually work as like almost like a kickstand. So like when you fall over, it keeps the engine from hitting the ground. Which if you crack that, you'd be really fucked. So that's why they have these guards on there. And And those also kind of serve as like a second kickstand. So like the bike fell and my knees, I think, got banged up on the sides of the motorcycle. My knees and my calves are all bruised up and my shoulder got bruised up. My hip didn't, I guess, because my hip and the outside of my knee are fine. Probably from the padding in my pants, my motorcycle pants. And my shoulder hurts a little. The insides of both knees are really whacked out. And thankfully, I thought I had hurt the same part of my knee that I've been rehabbing. But it's I hurt just a slightly different part of it, so it's a whole new different bruise. But it didn't prevent me from going on a nice walk yesterday, and then a really big hike today. I did a 5-mile hike earlier up around the reservoir. It's the same thing that I where I hurt my knee running back in July, and so anyway, I shook myself off pretty good, and the guys were like, "Are you sure you're okay?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm sure I'm fine." I took my eyes off the road. I was going too fast. I'm trying to fucking get out of here before the storm comes in, and it just started like raining a little. I wish I could blame it on the rain or an animal who jumped out. Like, you know, I like to joke sometimes when I've had crashes that the thing I hurt most is my ego, and that's it. But it's totally true, especially with this one. It's like, yeah, my ego's bruised. I don't want to be a guy that crashes, but like, buy the ticket, take the ride, right? You're going to ride a motorcycle around dirt roads all the time. You're going to crash. It's just going to happen. Like, shit happens. You just hope it isn't too bad, and you hope you can, you know. I was talking to a friend earlier, and he said, "Good thing you're a good rider." And I was like, "Yeah, well, good thing I'm a good crasher too." Because once I knew I was going to crash, there was that split second where I was like, "All right, I know I'm going to crash. There's no way around it. So like, let's try to make this crash as less bad as possible." And that's what ended up happening. But the guys are like, "Are you sure you're okay?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I said, I said to one of the driver who was the first one out to help me with the bike, I was like, "Well, thank God you guys came along and helped me get the bike up." And the guy said, "Well, thank God you made us such delicious burgers yesterday." And I almost fucking died. And I was like, "Are you serious?" And he was like, "Yeah, man, we were at the tavern yesterday. You made a great burger." And I was like, "Holy shit." And the passenger guy was like, "Hell yeah, you did, man." He's like, "We'll be back for more soon." And I was like, "Well, thank you. I really appreciate it, guys." And they're like, "Yeah, you sure you're all right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm just going to try to get home now." And they were like, "Okay." And I got on the bike and fired it up and took off, and they went off the other direction. And then the only thing I could think as I started pulling away was, man, I hope those guys don't go to the fucking tavern and tell everybody that I crashed, because I don't want to have to fucking explain that to all of them. And it's pretty funny that was my first instinct, was like not wanting other people to know I crashed. I had told everybody I'd text them when I got home, and I did. I sent texts to everyone whose phone number I had, which is granted not a lot in Yellow Pine. And I texted Candy and Jeff and Lauren. And I really think those are the only phone numbers I have. I have Dawn's number. She wasn't around this week, though. Wonder where Dawn's been. She's probably still getting off her Dave Matthews high. So yeah, I did text everyone when I got home, and I guess those guys hadn't gone back to the tavern for dinner because nobody texted back saying, "Hey, some guy showed up and said you had crashed into a ditch." Oh. This is me not laughing at trauma. Maybe it is, because there's that book, The Body Keeps Score, right? But it didn't feel traumatic. It just felt goofy. Never did I feel like I was in any like ridiculous sense of danger, but I guess maybe that's because you're in a ridiculous sense of danger every time you're on a motorcycle. And Aaron, save it. Please do not text me telling me to be more careful. Just gonna make me angry. I don't know why I had a feeling that Aaron Lazar is going to be the one who texts me telling me to be more careful. Speaking of getting texts from people about things I say on this podcast, I know people listen to it because I see the stats, but I haven't heard from many people who've been listening lately. So if you're digging this podcast, I would love to hear about it. Or if you don't dig it and you're like, man, talk more about this or talk less about that. Or if there's a particular story you want to hear. Sometimes it gets hard to come do this every week all by myself and talk into the nothingness. I'm just talking to a bunch of pine trees while I'm laying in a fucking hammock. And sometimes that's hard. And I would like some feedback. So if you want to reach out to me, my email is jake@rocksoft.com or szuf@me.com, or you can text me 917-443-7615. I deleted my social media apps off my phone again this week, so don't try to get at me at Twitter or Instagram. I will probably post something about the podcast on those places, but like, that's not a good place to get in touch with me. My phone is my phone number. You know what I mean? Text me or Venmo me some money. Even better, send me some money via Venmo and put your message in the note field. Then I'm sure to read it and almost sure to respond. But yeah, it helps to know I'm not talking into a void sometimes. I know recent episodes were the end of the summer and things get weirder. Maybe you're just not listening anymore, and that's fine too. But if you are listening, I'd love to hear about it. So let me know. And I'll keep doing this. I gotta say, it felt nice to not do one last week, and I considered not doing one this week and then posting something old. But like every time I sit down and do them, I feel better about it. I feel better about taking my human turbine self to Yellow Pine for this winter and really hunkering down and finishing this book. And yeah, I'm excited to really dig into that and get it done. And I'm excited for a whole new kind of adventure. And I'm excited to test my theory up there and see if it's true and see if am I going to be my own turbine when there's literally nobody around. Like maybe I'm a turbine that needs wind and water of some sort. Maybe it needs the wind of just fast motorcycle rides. But I won't get that. Like it's really going to be a still, quiet winter. Everyone who I've talked to about the winter says one of the most magical things that's going to come is that when you're just sitting out on your porch and you watch an elk walk down Main Street in Yellow Pine in fresh snow. And I can't wait to see that happen. I can't wait to see how still it's going to feel up there. Like, with only 24 people. I don't know how many households that is. I got to look that up because a lot of the people who live up there for the winter are married couples. Just, probably, looking at around a dozen households, Well, there's not going to be much activity up there, which is cool. I'm excited about. I'm a little scared about, but I changed my entire perspective, which I talked about a couple weeks ago, that I don't have to live in Yellow Pine. I get to live in Yellow Pine for the winter and see what that is like. Be curious to see how many other towns of that size actually exist in such remote locations that are that far away from any sort of services, right? It's got to be one of the most remote functioning towns in the lower 48. Because there's going to be other remote towns that are like, oh, it only takes an hour to get to the grocery store or the dollar store. But how many places are there like Yellow Pine where you're that far away, where you're I don't know what it's hard. You can't really go with mileage because you're talking about these mountain pass roads. So mileage varies, right? Like if you're 50 miles away from something in Arizona and you're living out in the desert 50 miles away from the nearest gas station, well, that's going to be an hour away. But when you're 52 miles of a mountain pass rocky dirt road from the nearest gas station, that's 3 hours. Yellow Pine to McCalm by a car and 90 minutes by a motorcycle. So yeah, I might be living in one of the most remote places in America when you factor those things in. And I'm going to make the most of it. I'm going to grab that goddamn fucking huckleberry and squeeze it, get all the juice I can out of that frozen huckleberry all winter long. And I'm going to squeeze and squeeze and see what kind of juice I can get out of it and see how I come out on the other end. Knowing too that I'm not trapped. It's not a sentence, right? I'm not being sentenced to Yellow Pine like Mushroom Steve might have been sentenced to 10 days in the slammer in the Cascade Court last week. But I get the chance to go there and do whatever I want for the winter. And just paint and write and not have the option to just go down the street and distract myself with things. So yeah, it should be pretty cool. I'm hoping some of you will distract me with text messages and phone calls. Even if I've been a bad texter returner over the summer. I'm sure some loneliness is going to set in. I'm sure shit's going to get weird when I'm up there for a couple of weeks. I guess, right? But it didn't really get weird here too much. I guess it did a little. But COVID was also newer. I was newer to being alone in a place like this. I had Greg and Shanti around, but I didn't lean on them nearly as much as I thought I would last winter. And I'm sure something's going to call me out of there at a certain point in the winter to go have some fun or end up going down to Mexico or Puerto Rico or God knows what and get some sunshine. I'm not going to just stay there the entire fucking time. But I'll come to McCall and I'll head down to Boise. Sweet, sweet Boise. Garden City. Pretty, pretty Garden City. Go to Costco. Walmart. Winco. Go to the munch counter. Wherever I need to go to get what I need. Yeah. I get to live in Yellow Pine for the winter. And you get to do whatever the fuck you want. Give yourself permission to do something different. Do something strange. Do something wild. Do something you never could have imagined yourself actually doing. Just a year ago or 6 months ago or even yesterday or even fucking 5 minutes ago before I brought this up. It's like, hey, give yourself permission to do whatever it is that you think might make you feel different and look at life in a different way. Come on, what's the worst that could happen? I'm still here. I don't plan on going anywhere anytime soon. I want to hear from you. And I miss my friends. Not enough to move back to New York City, but that's not where they live anyway. And I know that from looking at the stats on this podcast. I feel like Romper Room, but I'm reaching out there, and people are all over the world. Someone come visit me. Why does nobody come to visit me where I am? What the fuck is wrong with you guys? What's the worst that could happen? Come to McCalm. Come to Yellow Pine. Don't give me shit if I don't come to see you when I'm back in New York, right? Like, come find me. I'm not hard to find, especially if you already know me. And with that, I'm going to get out of here. It's been an hour. Maybe go see what's going on in my house. I'm going to give you a little view of the woods here and the pine trees. Woohoo! Anyway, God bless. Peace. I love you. Inshallah.